It seems like a lot of people out there still don't know the difference between piracy and emulation, and I think it's kinda crazy because the difference is very clear. Emulation is just taking on the properties of another system to play games on it. Let's say you take your PC and you make it take on the properties of a Nintendo Wii or a GameCube to play those games. That is completely fine and legal. However, piracy is basically when you just go to a website and steal a bunch of games so that you can play them without actually buying them. And yes, of course, you're going to need an emulator to play those pirated games. But just because people pirate games and play them on an emulator, that doesn't mean it's the only way to play emulated games. You can do it 100% legally. I hope this clears a lot up because there's a lot of people out there I know that don't really know that much about emulation, either that or they're a fanboy with their head stuck up Nintendo's ass. The gameplay you're seeing in the background is a completely legally emulated game that I own, and I'll even show proof that I own not only the game, not only the console, but also a controller to play the game. So I have all the things here to play the game, it's just I prefer to redump the game and play it on my PC. There is not only nothing morally wrong with what I'm doing, but there's also nothing legally wrong with what I'm doing. Now I bring that up because the fanboy that we're going to be taking a look at today equates the two at pretty much every single opportunity he gets. He thinks that piracy and emulation are the exact same thing when that couldn't be farther from the truth.
It's over. Nintendo has won.
They won this specific battle against Yuzu, but let's be real, another Switch emulator is gonna pop up. Actually, I think it already did. It's called Rejinksu or something like that, and there's another one called Suyu. Even if Nintendo wants to sue every single emulator out there for their consoles, new ones are just gonna pop up after every single legal battle. And even if Nintendo took down every single emulator out there, the internet is forever. Internet archives exist, people can still find these emulators. I know how to still get Yuzu. But obviously I'm not going to give people tutorials because I don't want to get in any legal trouble, but you can still easily do it. There truly is no such thing as removing something from the internet. Once it's on the internet, it's there forever.
The Yuzu emulator has been taken out, Citra along with it. The developers will not be allowed to continue developing Nintendo Switch emulation software.
Now I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure Yuzu was an open source emulator, so anyone could just easily pick up where Yuzu left off and start developing another Switch emulator. As long as they don't make the same mistakes that Yuzu made, they probably won't even get taken down anyway. I'm pretty sure from what I've heard, I've done a bit of research on this, but I think Yuzu was kind of promoting piracy, and that's why they got taken out. Another reason they probably got taken out that I found while researching online is the fact that they had a Patreon where they made money off the Nintendo Switch emulator. If you avoid these two mistakes and make a Nintendo Switch emulator, they probably won't even take it down. Why haven't the other Switch emulators gotten taken down? I also decided to research why Citra would have gotten shut down then, and apparently Citra and Yuzu worked together, and that's why Yuzu and Citra had to cease at the same time.
They are finished. And with them are the PC Master Race. The people who would openly go on 4chan or YouTube or X or whatever and brag about playing games early.
People playing the game early can still do it 100% legally. I remember Mutahar had a tweet out because his local video game shop actually broke some rules and sold one of the games early, and he went ahead and he redumped his cartridge and put it on his PC. That is 100% legal. Well, it's legal for the person emulating. The video game store is probably going to get in a bit of shit for that. But the people out here bragging about pirating Nintendo Switch games and are open about it, you're probably part of the reason as to why it got shut down. So if you're a person who pirates Nintendo Switch games, just keep your fucking mouth shut about it, okay?
Right. We saw this as recently as with Unicorn Overlord. The last time I went on 4chan ever,
this motherfucker actually uses 4chan, are you kidding me?
It was about people bragging about how they were playing Unicorn Overlord early. I know people in the community, Joe from Seattle, who was openly taking sponsorships from Atlas while planning on emulating the game on PC.
And guess what? There's absolutely nothing wrong with him doing that, because emulation and piracy are two completely different things. Now, if he was openly pirating the game, then yeah, you'd have a point, but that's not what he's doing.
Unicorn Overlord, of course, it did not get an official release on PC. So he would have to emulate the Switch version, and most likely he was intending on pirating it.
And how would you know if he pirated the game or not? Like, if you see a gameplay in the background of a pirated game or a emulated game, how are you going to be able to tell the difference? How are you going to prove that he pirated the game and he didn't own a legitimate copy and just redump it and put it on his PC? There's no way for you to prove it.
A game that he took money to shill, right? 3DS emulation. Citra was the de facto 3DS emulator. It was the most relevant. I believe it was the most successful. It was the one that I think kind of spearheaded the whole 3DS piracy scene.
As I have to point out time and time again, you can do it 100% legally. You can take your 3DS, mod your 3DS, put your game in, redump the cartridge, and put it on your PC. So to say that Citra spearheaded 3DS piracy is extremely disingenuous because I doubt that's the reason the tool was created. Yes, a lot of people use Citra to play pirated 3DS games, however that's not the reason the tool was created. The tool was created to play your 3DS games on your PC once your 3DS breaks, or if you want to redump it and play it with mods or something.
But now that it's gone...
Let's not kid ourselves here, Harmon. Citra has not gone anywhere. It just might take you an extra minute or two to find it, but like I said before, everything on the internet is forever. Once again, just like Yuzu, I know exactly how to get Citra working even after they took it down. Once again, I can't give you guys any tutorials on how to do it because I don't want to get in any legal trouble, but it's definitely possible. And there's already a new 3DS emulator out there called Panda 3DS that you can go ahead and download right now and play your 3DS games on.
People are going to have trouble finding another emulator that runs as well, right?
Even with them removing Citra, it's not hard to find a Citra download and get Citra up and working again. Also, there will literally be other 3DS emulators that'll be created that'll catch up to Citra eventually. You can't beat emulation.
This older platform, the 3DS, this legacy platform, is no longer going to be supported by the Yuzu developers.
But the latest release of Citra can play almost every single 3DS game, so is it really gonna need that much more updates? Also, as I already mentioned, if there is a problem with the Citra 3DS emulator not being able to play certain games, Panda 3DS is already in the works, and that's a 3DS emulator that you can download.
Right. What happened? I thought that Nintendo didn't have a case. I was assured by YouTube lawyers, right, the Twitter legal team, that nothing Yuzu did was wrong, that Nintendo was filing a frivolous lawsuit, that emulation was completely legal.
And emulation is completely legal. I mean, do you think I'd be playing emulated games in the background of my videos if it wasn't legal? But the reason Yuzu got taken down isn't because they were just a Switch emulator, it's because of things like them apparently promoting piracy. I don't know too much about this, but apparently they did, as well as them having the Patreon where they're profiting off of making a Switch emulator, not to mention the fact that the Switch is the current console on the market. Emulation is completely legal, but it's definitely safer and you're less likely to have a lawsuit thrown your way if you do it with older legacy consoles.
Right? And yet, somehow, in less than a week, Nintendo has completely taken out the company. They've taken out their business. They've taken out their Patreon. You can't even download Yuzu and Citra anymore off of their website. It's all been taken down.
Citra and Yuzu can't be downloaded anymore on their website, but it can still easily be downloaded, trust me.
It's over, right? The reality of the situation is far different than the emulation shills want you to believe, right? Yuzu, we're getting games up and running early.
Now, if this is the case and Yuzu was promoting playing pirated Switch games early, then that's why they were shut down, not because they were a Switch emulator, and that explains why Yuzu got shut down and not the other Switch emulators. Now, there's a good chance that this guy is lying because it's Harmon Smith, however, this proves my point even farther. It's the promotion of piracy that got them shut down, not emulation.
Because if you take away the early access, if you take away the whole getting games for free thing, if you take away all of that, the reality is emulation is not superior to the original hardware.
That has to be the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard, and you fucking know it. Alright, let's compare the emulator I'm using in the background to play this game, Dolphin, to the original hardware. We're gonna compare the emulated version of Mario Sunshine, the game I'm playing in the background, to the original hardware version. The original hardware version can play at 480p. The emulated version can play at 4K. The emulator version allows me to use mods and cheat codes as well as patches like the 60 FPS patch I'm using. The original hardware version has none of that and is locked to 30 FPS. The emulator version allows me to download save files off the internet to import into my game. The original hardware version does not. The original hardware version only allows you to play with one set of textures, whereas the emulator version allows you to use texture packs and texture mods. I mean, I could keep going, but I think you guys get the idea. Harmon, it's time to stop huffing all that copium. It's not doing you any good.
You know, buying and paying for the game legitly.
But here's the thing, like I showed at the beginning of the video, I bought and paid for the game legitly, it's just I choose to play it on a different platform than it was originally intended for. And that's not because I don't have the original platform, because I also showed that at the beginning of the video, it's because I like all the benefits of playing the game on my PC.
And that's been apparent to anybody who's looked into this stuff for a long time, but
if that's the case, then how come I just disproved it in less than a minute?
The narrative, for the longest time, from these people is that, like, oh, playing this game on Yuzu, it's superior. You know, completely ignore the visual bugs, completely ignore the crashes, the corrupted save files.
You do realize almost every single one of those things is easily fixed on PC, right? Like visual bugs, you can usually download a patch for. Corrupted saves, you can easily just go ahead and back up your save. Like, this is all just like nonsense. It's all bullshit.
The issues, oh, like, I can, you know, do this, you know, like, it was all just a smokescreen. It was all just an attempt to try and drive people into pirating Nintendo games.
Yes, a lot of people pirate games to play them on emulators, however, that does not mean that you need to pirate a game to play it on an emulator. I mean, the background gameplay I'm using proves that right now. I've redumped the game, put it on my PC, and I'm playing it here.
Right, it was a direct attack on the company's business.
Emulation is not an attack on the company's business at all. In order to emulate, you still need a Nintendo Switch and a copy of the game that you want to dump off your Nintendo Switch onto your PC. And it's completely understandable why people emulate. I mean, Tears of the Kingdom is a phenomenal game. It's my favorite game of 2023, even with the limited hardware it runs on. However, a lot of people were not satisfied with the performance of the game. The game ran at like 720p, I think 1080p if you docked it, and it ran between 20 to 30 FPS. A lot of people just weren't satisfied with that, so of course what they're gonna do is they're gonna take their game, dump it to their PC, and play it on there where they can get a better resolution and a good frame rate. However, if the Switch was more powerful, I bet you a lot of people emulating this game wouldn't even be emulating it.
On like their financial gains, it was the primary weapon being used against Nintendo in year 8, right? You know, like the Switch is 7 years old now. It's in the middle, it's beginning its 8th year, and this was going to be the method in which PlayStation and Xbox fans, and PC, I suppose, as niche and irrelevant as they are, you
can just smell the amount of salt this guy has towards the PC gamers, and it's honestly hilarious.
Like, this was going to be the primary method that these communities would use to weaponize against the Switch. How many times have we heard over the past couple of years, when it comes to Switch exclusives, how they did not matter because, oh, I can emulate that.
Yes, and even with Yuzu being shut down, we can still emulate it because there are other Switch emulators out there such as Suyu and Rejinx. I don't know how to say it, man. I know some other fucker's gonna correct me in the comments, but yeah, there's still other Switch emulators out there. Also, in order to actually emulate the games legally anyway, you have to own a Nintendo Switch, so it's not like it's hurting the company at all anyway, because you have to buy the game to dump off your Switch, and you have to own a Nintendo Switch, so how's that any different than just buying the game and playing it on your Switch?
Now, the reality is quite different from that, right? You know, plenty of high-profile games don't get PC releases. Just look at the aforementioned Unicorn Overlord. But when you see just how desperately the community has been to legitimize emulation, how much they've been trying to defend it, how much they've been promoting it when it comes to Nintendo consoles. Like, curiously, you don't see people like trying to preserve games on PlayStation or Xbox.
Am I seriously gonna have to explain this? This should be common sense, dude. Like, let's be real here for a minute. The Xbox, anyway, we'll talk about PlayStation after, we don't have to worry about preservation on Xbox because Xbox has full backwards compatibility back to the original Xbox. As for PlayStation, the PlayStation 5 has backwards compatibility with the PS4, so you can play all your PS4 games, and PS3 has a really good emulator that isn't constantly under attack like Nintendo's emulators by Nintendo fanboys. And that's another thing I don't understand. For as much shit as I give PlayStation fanboys, like I have countless fucking videos roasting PlayStation and, to be honest, Xbox as well, fanboys, but they don't go after old emulators. Also, the reason we don't emulate the PS5 and Xbox Series X is because they're able to play most games in at least decent frame rates at 4K. So like at least 4K 30 minimum, and in a lot of cases 4K 60, whereas the Nintendo Switch will play sometimes at like 720p 20 to 30 FPS.
Probably because nobody wants to play them. But when it comes to Nintendo software, like, yeah, there is like a legit arms race to get this stuff up and running as soon as possible.
Yes, that's because in 2024, a lot of people don't want to be playing their games in 720p 20 to 30 FPS. I don't get how you don't understand this. Like, this is the exact same reason everyone's asking for a Switch Pro.
You know, it doesn't matter whether it takes 1, 2, 5, 10 years. Like, these guys are always going to be claiming that their PC versions of these Nintendo games are better than the Nintendo ones.
Alright, let's do a little quiz here. Which version of Super Mario Sunshine is better? My version that I'm playing at 60 FPS 4K, well, I have the video downscaled to 1080p for the recording, but I mean I'm playing in 4K 60 FPS, or the GameCube version at 480p 30 FPS. Which one is better? You tell me.
Right. But now, that's no longer a factor.
What do you mean that's no longer a factor? There are other Switch emulators out there. Not only are there other Switch emulators, but you can still get Yuzu if you know where to look.
Now, we have a legit example of a high-profile emulator, you know, the biggest in the scene, the one behind 3DS and Switch emulation being taken out in a matter of weeks, right? We have a bit more precedent for Nintendo going after emulation, for going after piracy. Now, for anyone who isn't a complete card, right? This outcome was obvious.
I definitely think it was a probable outcome, like I expected this to happen. However, the thing is, Nintendo is a much larger company than Yuzu is, and Yuzu probably doesn't want to go up against a company as large as Nintendo, so they probably just said, alright man, whatever, 2.4 million, like, we'll fuck off. And this is especially the case if Yuzu had some information behind the scenes that they didn't want coming to light, which I don't know if they did or didn't, but I'm just saying.
Right. Even people who were shilling for Yuzu, people like Mutahar, like, they knew what was going to happen. They knew there was no justification for emulation.
If there's no justification for emulation, then how come Nintendo sells you emulators in Nintendo Switch Online? Checkmate. Also, let's say 100 years from now, there's still some GameCube games that never got a port to another console, or there's no way of playing them without getting a GameCube, and the only remaining GameCube costs like $10,000. Do you really think emulation isn't justifiable in that case? Do you really expect someone to pay $10,000 for a fucking GameCube in that case?
They knew there was no legal support for it. They knew what they were doing was illegal, but they didn't care, right? Because so much of their business, so much of their channel, right? So much of their channel growth, it is reliant entirely on piracy.
Yeah, to say someone like Mutahar's channel is based somewhat on piracy and that's the only reason they're as big as they are is complete delusion, and both of us know that. Also, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, how would you know that he's pirating the games and he doesn't have legitimate copies that he redumps from his Nintendo Switch and puts on his PC?
It is reliant entirely on doing things that like no legit video game journalist would do. And in this case, it is promoting piracy. It is promoting emulation.
You literally have videos on your channel promoting Nintendo Switch Online, and guess what's in Nintendo Switch Online? Oh, that's right, emulation, emulators.
It is promoting mods.
If you think mods are a bad thing for video games, then honestly you might be the retarded one. Games like Doom that came out in 1993 are still alive and have an active community to this day because of mods. If you think mods are a bad thing for video games, you are delusional. Mods are one of the greatest things when it comes to video games. Honestly, if it weren't for mods in Elden Ring, I would have given up on gaming a long time ago.
It is promoting not supporting Nintendo hardware. It is pretending that Nintendo is an anti-consumer company for preventing piracy.
As good as their games are, they are an anti-consumer company. I mean, they're the only company that will refuse to sell you like certain GameCube games, but then at the exact same time go ahead and try to take down a GameCube emulator so that there's literally no way to play these games. They literally shut down Smash Bros tournaments for no reason at all, and then when a Splatoon tournament is happening and the players come out in support of the Smash Bros community, they shut down the Splatoon tournament as well. When one of the biggest Nintendo fans on YouTube, Etika, passed away because he lost a battle with mental health and people created non-profit mental health Joy-Cons, Nintendo shut them down. If you are seriously gonna try to sit here and say that Nintendo isn't an anti-consumer company or doesn't treat their players like shit, then you are fucking delusional.
Right? That is something you're seeing right now, is that people are going out there trying to convince you that somehow taking down the Yuzu emulator is anti-consumer, right? That is the buzzword that's been thrown around about Nintendo in recent years, but the reality is Nintendo's always been the most pro-consumer company, and that's always been obvious for people, actual enthusiasts, right?
Because there's nothing more pro-consumer than when one of your biggest fans decides to jump off a bridge because they lost a battle with mental health, and fans of one of your biggest fans decide to come out and make non-profit mental health Joy-Cons and donate every single cent they make to mental health organizations. There's nothing more pro-consumer than sending them a cease and desist. Let's say one of your family members die and you put a little Mario toy on their gravestone. I promise you Nintendo would come to your house tomorrow and sue your ass. What's worse than that is you'd probably still defend them. Honestly, I don't understand Nintendo because they make the greatest games out there, I think a lot of people could argue, but they have the worst business practices.
Like, you know, you don't see microtransactions, you don't see loot boxes, you don't see any of the other toxic practices that have been permeating the rest of the industry.
I don't know, let's go ahead and pick between two practices and see which one is more toxic. The first practice being microtransactions, and the second being sending a cease and desist for somebody making mental health controllers because one of your biggest fans decided to off themselves due to their struggle with mental health. Yeah, microtransactions are definitely worst in this case, am I right?
You know, just compare like how Elden Ring was treated compared to Tears of the Kingdom, right? You know, Elden Ring fans, they did not openly advocate for pirating Elden Ring the way that like emulation enthusiasts were shilling for Tears of the Kingdom to be emulated, right?
It's almost like Elden Ring had extremely good performance and good graphics, whereas Tears of the Kingdom ran at like 720p, 20 to 30 FPS. And a lot of us supporting Tears of the Kingdom being emulated aren't advocating for the game to be pirated. We still expect you to buy the game, buy a Nintendo Switch to dump the game from, and then put it on your PC. We just think it's a better way to play if you play it on your PC.
Like, it was not that prominent. And a big reason for that is like Elden Ring is simply not as popular as Zelda. It never will be, but at the same time,
who the fuck cares which game is more popular? I think they're both great games and you're gonna have fun with either one. Who cares which one is more popular? That doesn't prove anything.
There was a coordinated attempt to try and mitigate the success of this game.
You want to give a source that people were trying to mitigate the success of Tears of the Kingdom? Oh wait.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Right. You know, we saw this last year with people saying it was the same thing all over again, that it wasn't that popular, that it wasn't talked about, that it wasn't going to sell that well, that it hasn't sold all that well, that 20 million units somehow is a bomb.
I mean, he's right, 20 million units is nowhere near a bomb, but nobody out here is trying to say that it is a bomb.
In the eyes of the community, right? We saw these people like come out and just try their hardest to downplay Tears of the Kingdom, and emulation absolutely was a part of that.
But I don't think you realize, for someone to emulate the game, as long as they're not pirating, they still have to go out and buy the game and buy a Nintendo Switch to redump the game.
Right? Like, that was a major cornerstone of their argument, was that, like, oh, you can just emulate this on PC and have a better experience. Like, this, Nintendo needs to put out new hardware now.
I mean, let's talk about Tears of the Kingdom again. I think it's a great game, however, there are points in that game where you are running at like 21 to 22 FPS. As fun as a lot of the Switch games are, a lot of them perform like shit, and it would be really nice to play these really fun games with good performance. I mean, seriously, Ocarina of Time ran at 20 FPS, and that was back in a different fucking century that we're in right now. Do you really think it's acceptable to be playing in the same frame rate in the 21st century as we were playing in the 20th century?
Right? Like, it was just an attempt, like everything else, to keep the discussion around Nintendo software and hardware negative.
It's very hard to keep the conversation positive about Nintendo's hardware when you're stuck playing games at 720p 20 to 30 FPS, and I know I keep bringing that up, but it's true. Even if Tears of the Kingdom ran at 30 FPS 1080p, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but let's not sit here and excuse 20 FPS.
Right. And now, that is no longer a factor. Now, Nintendo has taken an epic W and is well on their way to establishing a Nintendo monopoly in this industry.
I'm sorry, but if Nintendo is only releasing their games for one platform and that platform is severely underpowered, they're definitely not going to be a monopoly.
Right. They were already going to do that. I would argue they already have done that. But right now we're seeing a lot of coping and seething from people who are vehemently anti-Nintendo.
We aren't anti-Nintendo. I will openly say that I think Nintendo makes the best games out of every single company out there right now, maybe besides From Software. However, what we are anti is being locked down to a platform to play great games that's stuck to 720p 30 to 20 FPS. What we are anti is shutting down emulators for consoles that you can't buy anymore so that we can play games that aren't sold anymore. We are anti those things. We're not anti-Nintendo.
Like, oh, the mobile gacha games make more money. Oh, PC gaming is becoming more and more popular.
I mean, the other day, Steam's setting a record for most users on Steam at one time. Like, it is becoming more popular, and the facts back that up.
Emulation, like, you have all these people shilling all these weird proprietary products.
I mean, the Nintendo Switch is literally the definition of proprietary.
You know, Steam Deck.
As someone who owns both a Switch and a Steam Deck, I can assure you that playing a Nintendo Switch game on a Steam Deck is a much better experience than playing it on the Nintendo Switch.
Like, oh, the Steam Deck is going to take off in Japan, right? It's going to be the biggest thing ever there. It's going to put the Switch in its grave.
Nobody was ever claiming that the Steam Deck would put the Nintendo Switch in their grave. Maybe a few fanboys of Valve out there were saying that, who knows. But when it comes to performance, the Steam Deck absolutely puts the Switch in the grave.
Right? You seriously had people, like, trying to tell you that the Steam Deck was successful.
Alright, let me ask you this question. Actually, let me go ahead and ask you two questions. First of all, why the fuck are you still coping about the Steam Deck, dude? It's been like 2 years now. Like, give it a break. And second of all, if the Steam Deck wasn't successful, then how come they made an OLED version?
The PlayStation Portal was successful. That, like...
For as much shit as I give the PlayStation Portal, and honestly, game streaming in general, because I just don't like game streaming, it somehow became successful. I mean, the facts are the facts, whether you like it or not, it was successful. I don't know how, but it was.
that emulation is successful.
How can emulation be quote-unquote successful? It's not something being sold, it's someone doing it out of the passion for preserving games or playing games on better hardware than it was originally intended for.
Right, that it's legal, really.
I don't know how many times I'm going to have to repeat this, and I know I'm going to get some guy in the comments, oh, why you keep repeating it, dude? I'm going to keep repeating it until you guys understand it. Repeat after me. Emulation is 100% legal. Okay, repeat that. Now repeat this. Piracy, which is different from emulation, is not legal.
Like, you have all these people, like, just shilling any and all alternative products simply to ignore the reality that Nintendo's are the most viable, right? They're the most affordable, they're the ones that are most fun to play, they're the ones with the best software, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
I want to point out one thing he said with his coping session there. He said the most fun way to play is on Nintendo. And I'd like to ask you guys a question. What would you rather play Tears of the Kingdom on? Would you rather run it on a Nintendo Switch where you play between 20 to 30 FPS 720p, or would you rather play it on a Steam Deck where you can run at 60 FPS 720p?
Right? Again, like the whole emulation thing, like the reason for it was because it was being commonly accepted by the community that Nintendo put out the best software. And the emulation narrative, that was simply an attempt at mitigating it. That was an attempt at trying to convince people that, like, oh, you don't need that inferior Nintendo hardware.
Alright, this is a fact. This is not something you can argue with. When you play Tears of the Kingdom on the Nintendo Switch, you are getting an inferior experience than you'd be getting on the Steam Deck. There's no way this guy is serious right now. There's no way he doesn't understand it. Maybe this guy just doesn't know what a frame rate is. He doesn't know what FPS means, and he doesn't know what a resolution is, like 720p or 4K.
To play Nintendo games, you can just do it on your PC, completely ignoring the fact that that's illegal.
But here's the thing, it's not illegal. It is not illegal to emulate games. It is illegal to pirate the game and play it through an emulator, but it's not illegal to just emulate the game. How hard is it for fanboys to do a very quick, simple Google search to find out that emulation is not illegal and they're talking out of their ass?
I do think I want to leave off on the fact that this isn't going to be the only situation in which this happens, right? One of the biggest one of the biggest narratives that have propped up this year in regards to the PAL World.
Alright man, we're done here. How many times are you gonna cope and seethe over PAL World? Dude, it's been months since that whole drama happened and you're still crying about it. I'm gonna end this video explaining this one final time for all the people out there that aren't very smart or may have been kicked in the head by a horse as a child. Emulation and piracy are two completely different things. To emulate an older console just means to take on the properties of that console, but piracy is going and downloading a game online that you don't actually own so you can play it through your emulator. I hope that is very, very fucking clear. Anyway, I'm out of here. This is a longer video. I'm sorry.